Welcome to Dynamic Life Perspectives, guidance for a new age. We're going to have a good time figuring out who you are, what you really want, and how to get there. Together, we're going to find your heart. Now here's your host, the Reverend Rob Lee.
I had so much fun just shooting the breeze with you yesterday. I came up with a title.
Oh, did you? What's that?
Shooting the Spiritual CACA with Reverend Rob and Laura.
I'm good. Shooting the Spiritual CACA. Okay. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? I can't be left alone in my head too often because danger happens.
You know, I'm never alone. And I used to have a shirt, one of those that said, "But it's okay, they all know me here."
Right.
You know? So yeah, no, I hear you. That's really good. That's, but that, I think that's a good thing because there's a lot of things that encompass spirituality and religion and everything else. And I think a lot of people have a lot of questions that some people are afraid to answer. And I think you and I could answer a lot of those questions.
I'm hopeful on that because everything is spiritual. Everything has a spiritual component to it. When we understand that,
Correct.
we can really start to live our life with wisdom and discernment, right?
It's funny that you say wisdom and discernment, as this morning I actually read and started studying the book of James in the Bible, which is all about wisdom, and it was written by Jesus' half brother, who basically was a non-believer when Jesus was alive. But according to the scripture, according to what people say, whether you believe it or not, I'm just quoting what the Bible has to say. Jesus actually came to him after the resurrection. He had a personal experience, and that's when he changed it around. And one of the big things, the only book he's accredited with is James, and it's the book of wisdom, So it's a lot of things. It's really cool. So
I did not know that.
Here we go. Yeah, this is kind of cool.
Well, with wisdom, there's so many facets to wisdom. One of the things I really would like to talk about today is just the concept of discernment, because there's so many people out there saying, oh, just love, light, and sage is going to fix the world. If love, light, and sage would fix the world, we'd have a much different planet right now, wouldn't we?
Exactly. And with discernment, and we talk about it, I hear, especially, it drives me kind of crazy when a lot of more conservative and people that are religious talk about certain things are going to save the planet, or one person's going to save, the country or whatever. When if you're going to go strictly scripturally, none of that's going to happen. That we're headed down the path according to Revelations. So it's like, okay, you can't say one thing over here because you're impassioned by a person, a belief, or a thing, and then claim to be that whole duality. I think that has a lot to do with confusing people about their spirituality. They don't know what to believe anymore.
And it's hard because there's so much misinformation out there. And I see this a lot. And with discernment, we have to learn to discern, right? Learn to discern what rings true for you, but also why. And if people can start thinking about, why does this ring true for me? Or am I all of a sudden triggered by somebody else's comment? I made a post, and this is going to kind of date what we're doing a little bit, but I reposted something from, I think, Graham Allen. And it was the fact that there was a school shooting recently, and our current president was supposed to say something about the shooting. Instead, he starts rambling on about chocolate chip ice cream. And it's mind-blowing, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm one of those families, or I know chocolate chip ice cream, that's what you're talking about when you're supposed to be saying, oh my gosh, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And the first thing that came up was somebody made this comment, well, he's still better than Trump. I'm like, dude, Trump wasn't even mentioned in my post. But that's a trigger point.
Right.
That's a trigger point where we're not able to use discernment.
And you know what? And when you talk about discernment, we're not just talking about spiritual discernment. We're talking about personal, everyday life, we've stopped thinking for ourselves. And I think that scares both facets, if we're going to talk politics or not, both sides of the aisle. Because, somebody that free thinks and can form their own opinion will also be able to come up with a third opinion. And God forbid we have that today about any topic. And discernment is so important. And one of the things that I was reading this morning is sometimes it's time to listen. It's time to read and keep your yap shut and let the things stew in process, because that's how God will speak to us, is in discernment. You're not going to hear, this is God, go to Africa. That's just not going to happen, but you might get a feeling going, wait a minute, something just doesn't ring true here. So before I fall into this, let me chew on this for a while, and we're not doing that anymore. Somebody could I never saw memes. I'm old. I don't know how you say it. Okay. Replace news like they do now. If a meme comes out and your person's in it, it's real. It's news. There's no discerning anything that happens. It's just a comment.
Well, there's no discernment with the news either.
No, I agree that don't.
Right? I mean, so we have, and this is where it's a business, but this is where I think that it's really important that we start following our intuition to use our discernment, because our intuition is actually our most powerful psychic ability. People walk around thinking that, seeing dead people is like the most powerful psychic ability. No, not so much. No. It's intuition, because when we have our intuition, we're connecting to God, we're connecting to higher source, we're connecting to our higher self through intuition. And this is a really big deal, because most of us have had our intuitive abilities beaten out of us as children, right?
Yeah, we don't want to free think. When it's funny you say that, as when I was in sales a lot, I did a lot of sales, and I taught people how to sell. Even though I hated it, I was good at it. People are trying to get me back into it. I just don't want to do it. I don't like it. But our children are born perfect salesmen. One of the first things we have to do is teach them who's in control of a conversation, the last person to ask a question. So as parents, we hated it when we said, why did you do this? And our kids go, I don't know. Why did you do that? So we teach them to stop doing that, because we don't want to face the question and somebody taking control of us. And that is some of the stuff we have taken the beauty of children and some of that fresh mind, that pure thought, where it's coming from a pure place, and we kind of beat it out of them because we didn't want to answer to it ourselves.
Right.
So I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on
and
that.
This comes up also, I think we need to look at kind of like family patterns, right? Family patterns are generational, because we don't know what we don't know. But true spiritual growth, I think, is the ability to look at the family pattern and either amend it or break free of it.
Correct.
Right? Because when we can do that, then we really own our power. We really own our sovereignty. Sovereignty is this big buzzword right now. Well, what does that mean? It means having, a certain sense of free will.
Correct. And I think that's it. And, getting back to what you were talking about with discernment, and we go back to the news, I think what's one of the problems people have in not being able to discern today, they don't have a source that they can fully rely on for truthfulness anymore. In my day, God forbid, I'm going to date myself, you had Walter Cronkite come on, and nobody ever doubted Walter. He was your Uncle Walter, and he was just telling you what happened. Now we have people not only telling us this was done today, but they're starting to tell us what it means. And so we trust that rather than going, wait a minute, let me double check some of that. Do I truly believe that? And I believe that's where we started giving away our ability to discern things. And discernment is huge. Like you said, psychologically, spiritually, with the family, is this person even hurting me or not? How many times you and I have both in dealing with in dealing with family dynamics and trauma, we have people that don't even realize they're damaged goods until we dig down deep into it because of gaslighting, because of denial, because of just complete utter, so opening that with people today is hard.
It is. And, it begs the question, what is the relationship between discernment and our intuition, right?
Correct.
What does that look like? And then the next step is how can we develop our intuition to enhance the discernment?
Exactly. And I tell people it's called practice. Just like anything else you want to be good at, it requires practice. Your phone rings. 9 times out of 10, we have something on our phone that comes up and says, this person is calling. Keep your phone turned over. When your phone rings, take a breath. We don't have to dive on it for the first thing. Get a sense and see if you can start even figuring out who's calling me.
Yep.
And you'll start, and you're going to be wrong a lot. But as you keep the practice up and you tune in, which helps us also tune in psychically, energetically with the people in our lives, we might even start being able to realize, oh, that connection belongs to this person and I'm with it. And that intuition is huge, because a lot of people also say, when we say the word psychic or intuitive, oh my God, you're a witch, you're doing all this bad stuff. We're all born with that ability.
Oh, yeah.
We're all born with it. But like you said, I think we've had it scared out of us, beaten out of us, or whatnot, to trust it. Because a lot of times, if I go with my intuition, some of my spiritual leaders get called into question.
Right. Very true.
Yeah. There's something about it. I hear you, and I know that's what it said, but something in my gut is telling me that's not what it meant.
Here's another line of thinking when you talked about the phone and just feeling the energy coming through the phone. When we start to do that, it's almost like we connect with the person on a deeper level,
Right.
but also we hear each other possibly better. Is that accurate, do you think?
Oh my God. Yeah, you're on it there. And I say one of the common problems we have in today's world is that we don't listen to understand. We listen to make a comment or to come back. So rather than hearing what the person's saying and take a moment, reformulating in our head, if you'll notice, and I've told people before when I'm in conversations with them, you're not listening to me. Oh, yes, I am. No, you're not. I watched your eyes. You're completely disconnecting. You're not listening to the latter part of my comment. You're already formulating your argument to my first sentence. Stop. Listening is huge to our intuitive, because if I can't listen to my wife, if I can't listen to my friend, if I can't listen to my children, how in the hell am I going to listen for spirit? Because then we all start going, well, that's just my voice and I'm being crazy. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding that people are talking like this, right? We're talking over each other, so we don't hear each other. And how do we bring that back down? Because it's almost as if humanity has gotten rather hostile.
Oh, I think it's definitely gotten hostile. And I think where part of this is a lot of people feel powerless. So therefore, when they have a belief that's become a core belief with them, right or wrong, no matter what you say, you're not going to change that belief. But we get to that point where I like Laura, but for her to disagree with me on this, I can't like Laura. And so it becomes a threatening thing when somebody disagrees with you. God forbid we go, all right, I'm going to listen. Can we agree to disagree? Or can I admit maybe I'm wrong? I might have to look at this a different way. For some reason, we have been taught you always stand your ground. Everything is stand your ground. Everything stand your ground. And there comes a point that's neither standing your ground, depending on what the topic is neither healthy. It's not mentally, it doesn't promote good mental health. It doesn't promote good spiritual health either.
Or growth, right?
No growth at all.
And that's a form of stagnation, which means your soul is stuck in that moment in time, unable to pivot, unable to maneuver around new circumstances and new data. And I think it's fair to say that we all make decisions based on the information we have. But as time goes on, that information that we had 5 years ago could have changed.
Completely changed.
And now what am I left with, right?
Exactly. And I think that's where some of our leaders with age on them, okay, that are older than you and I, but some of what we call the anchors to our community on both sides, whether they be Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, or whatnot, they've had these beliefs put into their head and they've preached them, stood on them for so long. They've beaten it down, and both sides from a good place. They thought they were saying the right thing. And now that the world is more open, now that we can communicate more, now that we're learning new things, we're calling some of their very basic beliefs into jeopardy. So when I call some of those historical ground rooted beliefs into jeopardy, I'm causing Laura to then second guess things she was told by her father, by her mother, by her grandmother, by her grandfather. Now we're getting into these deep family ties. And I want to ask you a question. Do you think, following that train of thought, that some of this, and I heard a preacher the other day speaking, and it made a lot of sense to me. I think the problem we have with our country and the world, people don't really know who they are as an individual anymore.
Yeah, there's an element, and I see in my work a lot, there's an element of mind control that's happening globally, and it's becoming deeper and deeper. And when we can shift our mindset, we break free of the mind control. And it can come through TV, it can come through the internet, it can come through those, pre-programmed belief structures, from childhood, etc. If we can shift our mindset, and there's many ways to do it. You find yourself getting angry over something trivial.
Correct.
What is really the trigger? So if you can go, one of the strategies, and I'm a firm believer in, yes, we can discuss problems till the cows come home, but what good is it unless we offer strategies or solutions, right?
Right.
But one of the solutions and strategies that I have for people is, if you find that you're being triggered or your thought process is so overcoming, you can't get past the do loop in your head, or you're hearing these voices that may not be yours. That's a very real aspect. There's a few things you can do. One is you can go to the sink and run cold water on your wrists. It's simply severing the connection.
Right.
You can also take orange essential oil and just inhale it, because the chemical reaction to the brain, it's real, and it shifts the chemistry there. The other thing we can do is use frankincense oil. I like to say, if it's good enough for Christ, it's good enough for me.
Exactly. And one of the things you're talking about here, when I was doing a lot of work with addictions, things like that, became very successful with this thought process. We hear it over and over again, mindfulness. By running cold water over your hand, I taught several methods to help people when they found out, because think about it, when we're in an emotional trigger, you're in it. It happens, you're there, your mind is there. It's not like, oh, let me prep for it, okay, or whatnot. So how do I stop that mind thought, that mind process, and get back to where I'm in control? Because again, I feel like a lot of us feel like our brain leads us around instead of us leading our brain around. And people want relief from that. They want to be in control. They don't know how to get there. So a lot of that, I use the same aspect with keep a bowl of water in your refrigerator. Okay, you don't want it freezing because you don't want to get hurt. Keep a rag in it. But when you get in this point where I'm like, I can't get out of this mindset, take that rag, put it on your face. It's
Oh,
cold.
that's a great idea.
Okay, it's cold. So your brain starts going, well, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Okay. And
Mhm.
as things happen, you start doing things in the physical to affect what are normally autonomous symptoms, breathing. When was the last time you said, okay, I got to take a breath now? Okay, it's been 3 seconds. I
When
got to take a breath
when I had
now.
my massage therapist work on
No,
me.
but when we use mindfulness and some other things about breathing and tensing up and things like this, your brain starts pulling back and going, wait a minute, what's this crazy person asked me to do? And it starts paying attention to the here and now. And in that moment, we can grasp being here. And it takes practice in doing that over and over and over again. So there's a lot of science behind what you're teaching people, and it works for all kinds of different things. For depression, I can't get out of this mindset. Yes, you can. Most people don't know how.
And that's the part that I really value your history, right, with this, because we have to get to that. How do I do this? It's easy to say, well, just stop thinking about it, just stop, da, da, da. But how, right?
Yes. And some of this is some of the things I do in coaching, in spiritual counseling, different things like this. It's showing people how to stop and just slow down, be in the day, because we're so used to our brain kind of running on autopilot. You know, I used to draw a diagram for people and show them, we get up in the morning, we have task A, task B, task C, task D, and it's all the way through there. And a lot of times when we're getting up, task A is we're going, and then in between, while we're waiting for the kids to get up or while we're waiting for on the ride to work, we're thinking about task B. We're already going, how's this going to happen? And if you'll think about it, we sit here and plot and plan about, well, if this goes wrong, if that goes wrong, how am I going to react to it? I need to. And that has become life is task A, and I do circles around each task. That's not life. Life is the moments before task A. Life is the time you're spending between task A and B. Are you taking time to just step outside with a cup of coffee and breathe in the day and go, it was a pretty damn good day? Simplicity is how this starts. And it sounds so simple that people miss it. Okay. And well, I can't do that. Yeah, we can. It's very easy to do. But as much as I know about it, my wife has to remind me, hey, remember that crap you tell people? Yeah. Why don't you try it? You know what? You're right. You're
I
right.
like your wife. She's so on point.
Yeah. And then there are times I'm like, hey, babe, why don't you grab one of them crystals you got? And, she's like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
There for each other. But listen, be willing to listen and listen to yourself and listen to your body. And if you're not feeling good, your body will tell you something's wrong.
Dis-ease, right?
Yes, your brain will tell you, spirit will tell you, God will tell you, whatever you want to call it, energy will tell you. My vibes are off, things are like that. And it's so easy to get out of, but it's so hard because we become creatures of habit.
Well, and here's a thought that I think got us to this place.
Okay.
And that is, the 1100s look like the 1200s, which look like the 1500s, which look like the 1600s, right?
Yep.
Now, all of a sudden, in the past 100 to 150 years, our technology has gone from indoor plumbing to having my computer in my hand and access to all this information all the time. Did we, or were we gifted, right? And there's a lot of theories behind it, from the
Yes.
dark side, from the light side. too much technology too fast? Do we not have the wisdom and discernment to handle the technology properly, the information properly?
I would say right out gut instinct, you're absolutely right. Because, to quote Jurassic Park, they took the next logical step. But Jeff Goldblum said, as the doc in there, but did we ever stop to think, should we?
Good point. That's my concern with where technology is headed now.
Yeah. Our kids weren't meant to network. They, children were never meant to network because we destroyed the parental union. Go to your room. But we don't go to your room because most parents and say, and give me your phone. Number one, why does your junior have a phone? Okay. Number two, he's not supposed to go to his room and commiserate with 150 other pissed off 16-year-olds.
Right, right.
It's not supposed, you're supposed to go in there and do what? Be alone with your thoughts. Think about it. Could I have handled this different? And my boys and I, and my daughter, but I spent more time with my boys because they actually came back to live with me. And we had some great conversations once I grew up as the parent.
Mm-hmm.
And stopped this because I said so. And I started learning to listen.
And as from a parenting point of view, I always found, I have 3 daughters, that when they did something that was less than desirable, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
the concept of timeout, right, or whatever, go to your room or whatever, is great, but the real lesson is the conversation afterwards.
Yes.
And a lot of times parents just get upset, they're angry, and parents are overloaded too. I get that. The kid goes to their room, they're either forgotten about or they're able to come out in 5 minutes or whatever it is, and then it's done. But the real work never happened. Okay, so what other choices could you have made?
Right.
Right. And
I agree with you. And one of the things that we had to learn, or I had to learn, was, we have all been given, and we watch our society, it doles punishment out as a reaction.
yes.
Because of the way I feel, versus we should never be punishing out of anger. That's not the purpose of punishment. If we're truly trying for corrective behavior, we have to take that moment to do what you and I, and discern the child's actions and why they did it.
Right.
And if you can't listen, or because we don't have time to listen, we become that parent we swore we'd never become. And, I know my kids are like going, why did you wait till I was a young adult to learn that, Dad? But it's true,
Well, and it goes back to the concept that there's no perfect families, there's no perfect parent, there's no perfect child, but we come together to learn from one another in whatever role capacity we're in. We're here to learn from one another to improve ourselves, the parents and the children. Every parent's made mistakes. Any parent who says they were a perfect parent, well, I'll show you a liar, right?
Exactly.
And I think kids, the children also need to understand that their parents are also infallible. They're not going to make the best decisions all the time either, right? And I think for most parents, the idea is, safety, it's food and shelter and that kind of thing. But we're living in a society where we can expand upon that.
I agree. And I think one of the things parents, again, we have to discern, why does this action or the action they took having this effect on me? It's their action. They're going to have to live with it. Is it because it caused me time out of my day? Is it because I didn't want to deal with this right now? Is this, okay, wait a minute. Before I react, let's respond. And let's say, okay, let's give it a minute, little discernment, and go, all right, why do I have the rule in place to begin with? I caught my oldest boy smoking when I was smoking like a chimney, and I have been smoking now for 12 to 13 years, if not a little more. But and he was like his dad, big for his age, so he had no problems getting cigarettes. And so I remember standing in our garage, and I said, fired it up. I said, let me see you inhale that sucker. I wanted to see if he was just playing it. Or 14. Boy, he powered that down just like an adult. I'm like, okay.
Oh, darn.
Yeah. And there was no screaming, there was no yelling. And I think this is when I began to think and use my brain. I said, okay, you can't smoke. And you could see him get ready for this argument about you. And I said, do you know why you can't smoke? And it stopped him. And I went, two reasons. You're either stealing mine or you're going to someplace and lying about your age, stealing and lying. When you turn 18, if you make that decision, I'll give you one of mine if I'm still smoking, and we'll light up together. And you know what? From that point in, I didn't have a problem, because it was like, okay, because stealing and lying in most societal norms, whether you're 3 or whether you're, 33, is not acceptable. And that was the last conversation we ever had about it. When we were 18, when he turned 18, we were smoking together, until I quit. He quit. So, that it is, we have to stop reacting so much.
And that's the don't do as I do as I say concept, right? That's a big parental.
Because I said so. Yeah, how many times did we as a kid say, I'll never say that to my parents, but how many times do you have at that point, I don't have time to go in this right now. I'll go into you with later, and we mean it, but we turn around going, because I said so. Well, okay. And unfortunately, I feel like that's why the discernment with political government news, believe it because I said so.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us are programmed into that.
I know we need to start looking at where the truths lie, right? And that's not easy to do.
No, it's
not. And also I think that when people start going down those rabbit holes, I think mentally it really has a negative impact upon us. We're looking at all these little rabbit holes that we go down, and it's like, if I'm going down that rabbit hole, I must not be believing what I'm being told, right?
Right.
And is that enough? Or do I, for my personality, need to dig a little bit more, right?
Exactly. And the first question I ask people is, I want you to understand before you go down any rabbit hole, if you had a big one over going, you are correct. This thought process will take you down this rabbit hole, but you are right 100% of the way. What's at the other end? Is it going to matter? Before we waste that energy and effort, at the end, a big flag comes up and went, see, you're right. Now what? Life is going to continue on. We're still, and one of the hardest things I have to do, especially with older people, turn off the news. Mm-hmm. You want to know why you're angry all the time? You want to know why? Because the first thing you're doing is turning on something that is continually negative.
Right.
So, step away from it. Realize, the birds are outside.
And,
what this party does, the bird's going to fly to that tree, and I can either watch it or be all consumed and miss the most beautiful sunrise of my life.
And this goes, back to a concept I discuss a lot, and that is we can only impact our circle. That karmic energy does echo out. So
yes, it does.
As we conduct our lives, as we have relationships and we have these experiences, that echoes out. And I can shift and I can change me. And when I change me, I can shift the energy of those relationships I have. Right?
Absolutely.
So, and I can't do anything about the federal government or this or that, but I can do something about myself.
Exactly. And you know what? I can vote, and I'll worry about it on election day. Now, if they come strolling an army down the street or whatnot, all right, I'll rethink some things about my actions, the way I need to adjust.
Exactly.
But here's what I find really wild. you know, according to the scripture, we have appointed leaders. Give unto Caesar that which is Caesar, give unto God that which is God. We're not to be confronting or disrespecting our leaders, whether we agree with them or not. So this goes again for both sides. You know, I remember, let's skip this whole mess when it was Obama and Bush, and Obama won. I remember going into my little morning cafe, and all these old guys are standing around going, I hope he falls flat on his face, you know, and there's this anger. And I stood up and I said, you know, I hope y'all are dead wrong. And they went, what? And I said, because if he fails, we fail. I don't agree with a lot of his stuff. But you know what? He's my president. Are certain things, do we need to discuss? Do we need checks and balances? Absolutely. But
Yeah.
at some point, before I direct my energy down that path, where does that energy end? And what did I open myself up to attracting by putting this out there? And then how do I, as a Christian, as a religious person, as a conservative or whatnot, expect people to listen to anything I've got to say? Because I was enabled to discern my own responses, my own reactions, and go, wait a minute. God told us, no. Stop. Wish people the best. Hope, pray, and move on. Be happy. Make people, if people don't want to be around you because you're always going off on a political thing, that should be a sign that, you know what? That's not what God wants. That's not what energy wants. That's not
You know how to balance, right?
Right. Because you're not attracting. If good people are going, yeah, you know, that's enough. I got to go. You know, here's your sign. And I'll get on a diatribe. So
there's only so much we can do on that level.
right.
And we can get involved in our local politics. We can get in our local schools, our local, I don't know, gardening club, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and when we get involved in the local, that's where our power is really.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of, I think, what maybe many are missing, because it's really that simple. And you know, going back to what you talked about with mindfulness, right? Just being in the moment.
Yeah.
And, you know, people ask me a lot of times, well, how do I know I'm meditating the right way, right? There's no right way. There's no wrong way to meditate. Half the time I'm meditating when I'm doing the dishes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or in the gardening or something that's physically grounding. I mean, I spend a lot of my time in these other realms, but I have to be grounded. And doing those earthly chores, right? It's very grounding because I'm here in a human body most of the time. No, I'm kidding. I'm here in this human body having these experiences too, even though I may be working in the other realms with clients or whatever. It's that whole picture, right? That whole sense of self that really is important. Keeping in balance is key. Spirituality should never be a contest. Once you make spirituality a contest, I think you lost, right?
Exactly.